Hi, everybody. My name is Julia. I gotta warn you that you should never repeat my story, even if you really want to, because even if it's good for you, it can become a nightmare to another person. Well, it all started when my mom suddenly fell in love, and she chose a very good option. Anyway, at 45, just out of the blue, my mom brought home a young 20-year-old guy to our place. He was almost my age, by the way. She said Gregory's gonna live with us now. Well, okay, Gregory. So what? Basically, I didn't care at all. Of course, I was annoyed by the fact that there was a stranger walking around, but not too much. I was busy with my studies. I rarely stayed home. I preferred to hang out in the dorm with my college friends. Anyway, it wasn't too far from my place, and we always had a lot of fun. By the way, my mom looks great. She does some sports, and she's always in good shape. She earns good money, and she hadn't had a man in her personal life. Well, probably ever since I was born. So I just wanted her to be happy, even though I frankly said this guy was kinda too young for her. But my mom assured me things were fine with this one. That was the end of our discussion. Well, at least I thought so. So, summer came. I perfectly passed my exams and I entered the university. I returned home for July and August, just to stay there before classes started. I wanted to go on a trip with my mom to the ocean. My goal was to have a good vacation before my adult life started. And here, problems started. I mean, it was a 6 foot tall, sea blue eyes, and very athletic problem with a charming smile. Oops, I guess I'm in trouble, girls. You got me, huh? I knew that falling in love with my mom's boyfriend was a disgusting idea, but I couldn't help it. I even had nowhere to go to stay away from him. All my friends had left somewhere for the summer. I didn't have a boyfriend at the time, and I couldn't move to his place. I even tried to speak to the university management so that they could arrange a room in the dorm for me. No, sir. Well, I did whatever I could. So, we went to the ocean. Of course, I did everything I could to conceal from my stepfather. I liked him. I tried not to cross paths with him. I looked in another direction all the time and avoided any eye contact with him. I even sometimes excused myself from joint lunches and dinners. Of course, my mom didn't suspect anything. She was wearing her pink glasses. She had an excellent daughter, a young lover, and a whole bunch of signed successful business contracts. Life was going just wonderful, except I don't know how he got it, but somehow I skipped the moment where I stopped being a victim of love and became a simple victim. The hunter didn't want to hide in the bushes. He acted decisively instead. I mean, Gregory really started following me all the time. At first, I thought I was winding myself up. Well, how could I? The first thing happened when we ran into each other in the hallway. By chance, he came out of the shower wearing only a towel, showing me his body. Then I was going down the stairs and almost fell, but just in time, he caught me, and we had a very close embrace. Well, that's how all chick flicks usually start. We came back to our house after the ocean trip, and then his actions ceased to be accidental. My mom often had some business meetings at work. Sometimes she had to stay very late. So Gregory and I were alone at home. He used to hang out in his room all the time, or maybe go out with friends. Sometimes he watched movies or something. But now, he used the pretext of having a new gadget or suggestion to watch an interesting movie together to enter my room. Then he would lie down on my bed and pretend there was nothing wrong with it. And those touches. He pretended they were random, but they became so frequent, and for some reason, he touched the spots where men usually don't touch girls who are not so close to them, especially if this girl is your stepdaughter. And my passion for him grew more and more, turning into some obsession. You see, I'm not 10 years old. I knew perfectly well about the birds and bees, and I just couldn't resist it. Yeah, you can call me a terrible girl, but you see, the heart wants what it wants. This story had a predictable climax: bed. I was terribly ashamed, and I didn't know how I was going to look my mom in the eye after what had happened between me and her boyfriend. She kinda loved him too, but Gregory never seemed to bother with this question at all. He said, "We're free people, and we can do whatever we wanted." Then he asked me to move in with him. I mean, he'd leave my mom and I'd become his girlfriend. He said a lot of other things, like I should follow my feelings, and my mom meant nothing to him. She was just a rich auntie who supported him, and my amorous brain translated it all into the language of lovers. He said, "Let's live together." And I heard, "Let's get old together, holding hands and surrounded by a bunch of our kids and grandchildren." Well, that's how it worked. And even though I felt insanely ashamed towards my mom, I agreed. Gregory packed up his things and moved to his apartment. He had a small studio somewhere in the outskirts of the city. My mom and I lived in the suburbs, in a very expensive district. I thought Gregory had somewhat the same. Idiot. Later on, my mom and I had a serious conversation. My mom looked at me. I guess, if it wasn't for something as romantic as a relationship, I'd even think she felt sorry for me. But she was kind of contemptuously sorry. She said I did a very bad thing. Still, I was her little daughter. Well, I babbled something about unearthly love, and that she would understand with time. My mom did understand me, but not in the way I wanted. In fact, she was cheated on in her own house. That was what she understood. Somehow it didn't work out with my unearthly love at all, because instead of the support I expected, she just opened the door wider and told me and Gregory to get out of the house. I couldn't even blame her. I don't know what I would have done in this situation. Moreover, we were really the ones to blame. So the whole situation was disgusting, but for some reason, Gregory got offended. At first, things were fine. Except that it turned out his studio apartment was not something fancy, like some of my artist friends had. It was a really small apartment, with a tiny kitchen and just a shower in the bathroom. In the evening, I couldn't enjoy the bird songs and the noise of the trees. Instead, there were always some neighbors yelling, some drunk teenagers playing guitar, and judging by the smell in the apartment, he was interested in something the police totally didn't like. I mean, weed. But we loved each other. We were okay with a sagging sofa instead of a luxurious bed. But we always had bright and loud sex. I tried my best to arrange our everyday life. I cooked breakfast for us in the morning. Though my culinary talent was limited to scrambled eggs and sandwiches, I even managed to learn how to use this antediluvian washing machine. And Gregory was always there for me. He supported me in everything I did. And then all hell broke loose. The money I had with me ran out. My mom blocked all my bank cards. And Gregory, well, it turned out all his money was actually my mom's money. In fact, all this time we continued to live at her expense. I couldn't go to work, school had already started. I just didn't have any time, and frankly, I wanted to eat. Gregory said he would solve this issue. Kinda, we loved each other, so we would definitely cope with it. Just now, we gotta be a little patient. So he went to work, but I really didn't know where. And we got some food and everyday things. Life got a little easier, but honestly, the pink glasses on my face started to slowly slide off. I don't know. Maybe I was a bad and spoiled girl. So nasty that I even stole a guy from my mom. But I totally didn't like living in poverty. Of course, I couldn't complain because I actually lived at Gregory's expense, and he tried his best to support us. And once there, we started having serious financial problems. I tried to save on everything I could. I even learned to cook food from simple products. I tried to cook some hearty dishes, enough for a few days. I kept records of our purchases, I collected receipts, and I did not allow myself to have anything extra. Of course, I always knew how much money we had. Therefore, Gregory's new shirt immediately caught my eye. It was a good brand name one, and it cost at least $100, despite the fact we spent the same amount on food for 2 weeks. Of course, I asked him where he got it, but he lied, saying his former colleague from work gave it to him as a present, though the size was a little bigger. I bought it, exactly until the moment when I saw a new watch on his hand. Surprisingly, it was also brand name. Then came genuine leather boots, cufflinks with some precious stones that even looked like real diamonds. Suddenly, Gregory found a lot of wealthy friends who just showered him with expensive things. But when I asked him to bring these wonderful people to our place, just to talk and to get to know each other better, he refused. Then he suddenly started working night shifts at his job. I mean, really. He left in the evening, wearing all his fashionable clothes, with a clean-shaven face and the smell of an expensive cologne. And he came back in the morning with a satisfied face and gifts from his friends. One day it finally dawned on me something was wrong, and I decided to follow my boyfriend. Not that I doubted him. I just wanted to see it with my own eyes. In fact, Gregory didn't even try to hide. He probably thought I would never follow him to check his lies. A couple of blocks from our apartment, he got into an expensive car. This car was like my mom's, so I knew the price. And it was driven by a woman, and this woman was elderly, and she didn't look too pretty at all. They started passionately kissing right in the car and then drove away somewhere. I cried all night long, because it's one thing to suspect, and another to see it with your own eyes. I mean, to see how the person you really love is cheating on you. And who was his lover? An old woman. What the heck? I felt like my heart was broken into pieces. I didn't know what to do or how to live on. After all, I broke any relationship with my mom for the sake of him. I refused money and a good, prosperous life because I loved him, and he... Then, for the first time in our relationship, I thought, maybe there was no love after all. When Gregory returned, we had a fight. I was totally dissatisfied with his cheating. I demanded he either stop all this or end our relationship immediately. Greg listened to me in silence and brought me a glass of water, then a towel. Then he hugged me and started saying he was sorry. He just loved me. He wanted us to live a better life. He said he wanted us to have a house with a garden and kids and grow old together and feed pigeons in the park. It's just that he didn't know how to earn money in any other way. He said he didn't have a sexual relationship with that woman, only heart-to-heart conversations and some trips to expensive restaurants. In fact, she only needed him to show him to her friends. I didn't believe a word he said. Maybe a couple of months ago I would have. But now, seeing all his expensive things, his nice shirts, his night shifts, and those kisses, but I still had some love for him, and I decided to give him a chance. I pretended everything was fine, but I just asked him to stop dating that old woman. I don't need money earned this way. It's better to live with what we had instead of spending this dirty money. But I pretended. In fact, I went to see my mother and told her everything. I apologized and cried, of course. My mom hugged me and said it was okay. Then I asked her to tell me what she knew about Gregory and how it all happened that they suddenly started dating. And my mom told me. It turned out that my boyfriend was just a typical gigolo. He went to nightclubs, talked to some rich women, and, well, you get me. Of course, he did it for money, but both parties were satisfied. Sometimes these were just one-night things, but some women really fell in love with him and suggested long-term relationships. Anyway, it was just business. When I asked my mom what I should do, she shrugged. She said I should decide for myself whether to stay with such a person and accept him the way he was or come back home. She said she would be happy to see me back. Of course, without Gregory. So I left. I had to think about it for a while, and I wasn't ready to leave him right away. What if a miracle happened, and my love would put him on the correct path? At least, he promised all these house kid things. For a while, things were going really great, just like they had been before. Greg stopped disappearing at night. He told me about his new job. He was just an ordinary clerk in some small company. He even gave me some gifts. I calmed down and believed that miracles do happen. And it was nice that despite my mom's bad prognosis, he did it. But my mom said people like him would never change. But he did. For me. I even texted my mom she was wrong about Greg. Everyone has a skeleton in their closet, but that doesn't mean you can't change if you try really hard. My mom sent me a smiley face in response. I am such a fool. I'm even ashamed to remember these thoughts now. My only excuse is that I was 18. All girls believe in eternal love at this age. I was about to see Greg's boss. I'd never seen her before because he brought me to his work when she wasn't there. I don't know whether he did it on purpose or it was just a simple coincidence, but I suspected he calculated everything in advance. Because when I decided to visit him, inspired with his changes, well, I wanted it to be a surprise for him and to bring him sandwiches for a snack. At this moment, Greg was in his boss's office. They were alone there for a long time, and there was no doubt they had locked the door. Well, yeah, the boss was the same woman whose car he had jumped into a couple of months ago. My world collapsed. I could even hear its fragments falling somewhere at my feet and breaking into millions of pieces. All this time, Greg continued to lie right to my face. I didn't listen to his explanations. I just went back to our studio, packed up my things, and went to my mom. And there, I'd been crying nonstop for several days in a row. My mom comforted me and said he wasn't worth a single tear of mine. My mom and I made peace. However, it turned out I was the one who was always fighting with her, and she was just always on my side. Anyway, one day we sat down and just talked without any issues. Things turned out to be quite funny. My mom kicked us out not because she was offended. Being a mature and smart woman, she understood perfectly well I would never hear her words. So she decided to give me an opportunity to understand what kind of person Greg really was. At first, I even wanted to get offended, but then I thought about it and realized my mom was right. Just imagine, she says, "My dear daughter, Greg is a badass. Stay home. Don't move in with him, all right?" So what? I would have thought she was lying to me and wanted to break us up. But in fact, that was a really demonstrative life lesson. This story might have ended here, but it had a very unexpected sequel. Greg ambushed me in front of my university and asked to talk. I agreed. Well, it was interesting for me to know what kind of new things he would come up with and how he would excuse himself. In fact, he made no excuses. He blamed it all on me. He said he was working hard by dating rich girls all the time, and I was just a fancy girl who freeloaded on him. And he had to switch to the old ladies because of me. He used to live a beautiful life, and the money was always enough for him. And with me, he had to double his income and work harder. Honestly, I was totally stunned by such impudence. But that's not it. Then he suggested, with a most serious face, looking me straight in the eye, Greg said it was still possible to fix everything. I should apologize. He would forgive me, and we'd be back together again. And the three of us would live together again. Me, him, and my mom. I had no words. I silently got up from the bench and went in the opposite direction. When I was back home, I was crying on my mom's shoulder again, telling her this stupid story. Apparently, my negative answer reached Greg, because he never appeared in my life again. That's my story. And I just want to warn you guys, some people never change, and it's better to stay away from these badasses. Otherwise, a very painful and unpleasant experience is going to happen to you, and you'll be disappointed later. Write in the comments what you think of me and my story. Click thumbs up if you enjoyed my story. Subscribe to the channel and click the bell button to stay tuned all the time and never miss new stories. See you later, and take care.